Nearly 23 million people now live in the state of Florida. 23 million pieces of an increasingly complicated puzzle where the cost of living is rising. This week, I spoke with House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell on the issues facing Florida voters and the political reality check in Tallahassee. Is the abortion amendment too radical for Florida voters?
No, I think what's radical is the governor's positioning on this. We know that these are very personal decisions of heart and home. We know that most Americans, including most Floridians, actually want safe, legal access to abortions. And so what I'm starting to pick up on is that the governor and some extremists in the legislature are trying to paint this as a radical amendment, but it's not. I mean, you can even just look at the special election we had in Central Florida in January, where we elected Representative Tom Keene to the legislature. Tom is a Democrat, and there was a very clear choice for the voters of District 35 on who would protect abortion and who would not. That's what the voters wanted to talk about. So I think Governor DeSantis is out of touch, and I don't think these fear tactics will work in the fall when this language is on the ballot.
Well, it seems like it always comes down to an argument over the language on the ballot itself. Amendment 4, as the abortion amendment will appear on the ballot, says it will allow doctors to terminate a pregnancy up to the point of viability. Does it name a specific amount of weeks, though? And is that where some might get confused or skeptical? Why not just define it at a number like 24 weeks?
Well, viability for 50 years, maybe more than 50 years, has been consistently defined as the point at which a fetus could survive outside of the womb, which I think is generally understood to be around 24 weeks. But the reason why the ballot language leaves that language in viability and let it be determined between a healthcare provider and the patient is because we need to leave these decisions up to science. Every pregnancy is different. And so we want to make sure that we're caring for the mother, that we're making sure that we're letting the professionals who are looking at the circumstances of that pregnancy can make that decision. But it need not be a scary term. Viability is a term that's been used, like I said, for over 50 years, and it certainly was the law of the land while Roe was in effect. And so that's why I think it's important to not define it, leave it up to the healthcare professionals who can decide what viability is for a particular pregnancy.
Well, meanwhile, Amendment 3, legalizing recreational use of marijuana and in some amounts. The governor says it's going to bring down the quality of life in Florida. He says that people will walk down the street smelling marijuana in public spaces. Is this amendment necessary?
It is necessary because, again, this is a governor who is out of touch with the people. Most Floridians want legalized access to marijuana for adults. And if the governor wants to have a conversation about quality of life in Florida and how it's declined, I would welcome that. Under his leadership, Florida has had the worst property insurance rates in the country. Our property insurance rates are the highest. We're facing one of the worst affordability rates in the country. So there is a lot that he has done to lower the quality of life of Floridians. But adult access to marijuana, I don't think is one of them.
There does seem to be a growing frustration, obviously, among Floridians these days when it comes to the cost of living. Those are tough challenges that the Florida legislature has tried to tackle with, you could argue, limited success. And I guess my question here is, should Florida voters have more opportunities to decide more issues through amendments? Is there a downside to bypassing the lawmakers?
Well, I'm very grateful that we have the opportunity to have direct democracy here in Florida and leave some of these questions to the voters, because frankly, in this Republican-controlled legislature that is controlled by a supermajority of Republicans, too often they refuse to listen to the will of the people. I've seen it in committee hearings, maybe you've seen it, where folks have come from all across the state to testify how a particular bill will impact them. Please don't pass this bill. Sometimes they share their party affiliation. Sometimes they are Republicans, and my colleagues across the aisle refuse to listen to them. So it is important for us to have this ballot initiative process where the people can make their voices heard. Now, one thing I want to flag is that my colleagues across the aisle have consistently tried to make it more difficult for these ballot initiatives to reach voters when it's time for elections. They want to increase it, for example, from a 60% threshold for approval to 66%, which would be much more difficult. So it's something that people should keep their eyes on. But yes, it is is something that we need to continue in Florida to have access to these ballot initiatives.
What is your final assessment of the 2024 legislative session? Was it less political this year in tone and in results, more importantly, or was it about the same from the year before?
My take on this legislative session is that it was a missed opportunity, right? We had the governor coming back from his failed presidential campaign. He certainly was distracted, so we didn't hear from him as much as we had in prior legislative sessions. And it was our opportunity to do something big, significant, and positive for the people of Florida. For example, passing legislation that would lower property insurance rates or doing more for affordable housing, and we didn't do any of it. We passed the Live Healthy Act, which was good, and I think is moving healthcare in Florida in the right direction in terms of trying to make sure there's more access to doctors, et cetera. But we didn't do the one thing that would guarantee access to nearly 1 million more Floridians, which is expanding Medicaid. So to me, this session was one of missed opportunities, and we certainly could have done more while the governor had his attention on his own ambition.
Well, 2025 is, a long year, a long way away, but what would be your top priorities for next year? What are we missing right now?
Well, I think we have to continue to talk about affordability because that is an issue that has not been addressed. Homes are getting more expensive for people. Rent is increasing. These property insurance rates are out of control. So we have to continue to beat that drum. We must talk about Medicaid expansion. I know there's an effort right now to see that on the ballot in 2026, but it sure would be great if the legislature could intervene there and help make healthcare more affordable for all of us in the state. So those are two issues that are top of mind for me and that I know my caucus and I will continue to push for. We believe that every Floridian deserves the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe, whether they are in Escambia County or down in Monroe, and we certainly will fight for every Floridian's ability to thrive and lead a good life in our state.
House Minority Leader Representative Fentrice Driskell, thank you for your time and thank you for insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next on Full Circle Florida, our final thoughts on the week that was and what we learned.